Andrew Petiprin. Welcome to Bookish Questions with Cultural Debris.
Thanks for having me, Alan.
We were just talking about springtime. It is springtime, and that's nice. We've got warm weather here, but doesn't Texas always have warm weather?
You'd be surprised. I grew up mostly in Florida, Alan, and for me, Texas is kind of cold. It's actually kind of a cold place to live sometimes. We have a winter here. It's nothing like, living up north, but it's you definitely feel the transition from winter to spring, even here in hot Texas. But yeah, sooner or later, it's going to be over 100 and it's going to last for a long time. So,
Yeah, that part I'm not envious of. The whole over 100. At its warmest here will sometimes hit 100 during the summer, but it's never for extended periods. We might have a heat wave of 2 or 3 days or something, and we'll do a fair amount of time in the 90s, but typically we'll get, we're more 80s for summer. But we digress, or at least I do. Last we spoke, we talked about Popcorn with the Pope. In the full episode of Cultural Debris, I'll refer people to. Have you seen any good movies lately?
I haven't been watching a whole lot of movies lately. I've just been kind of revisiting some old favorites and turning on the Criterion channel and watching the 24/7 feed, just kind of like dipping in and seeing what's on offer. Like the other night, the Japanese movie Tampopo was on, which is a great movie about like food and gangsters, and it's great. So I was watching that. I watched part of Purple Noon the other night, the great movie with Alain Delon that there's an American version called The Talented Mr. Ripley, same story. So I don't know, a bit of this, a bit of that. What about you?
Well, not really. I did watch Conclave recently, which I had sort of I hadn't vowed not to see it, but I wasn't going to go to the theaters to see it. I did like the cast and the it's tempting to see the set and the costumes and so forth and for all of that, but it's apparently already streaming. So my daughter watched it and said, "You need to see it," and I thought, well, okay, I'll watch. So we watched it, and it's a fun / frustrating movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't recommend it, but the cast is nice. You get to see inside the Vatican and Sistine Chapel and maneuverings and so forth, and but it is frustrating, of course, and I'm sure most people know the ending, but the ending's frustrating. So
I've heard.
so
Yeah.
I don't recommend
I haven't seen it.
but I was just talking with a friend of mine who goes to movies all along, and I have not been to a movie really in a while, and they just don't release things I want to see. And I used to be, before I got old, I used to be a, fairly regular cinema goer. I like going to the movies. I really enjoy going to the movie theater and seeing a new release, but they just, I don't know. I guess I am getting old. I don't know, but
well, I think that what's on offer is not always so great these days. So
yeah.
I don't go as much as I would like, unfortunately.
But I need to keep an eye open for re-releases and so forth. I saw the 20th anniversary of Pride and Prejudice was coming out. I know some people are not necessarily kind of knock the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, but I always liked it and thought it was good. So maybe I should just start going to see old movies in movie theaters, and that would make me happy. But we are here not to talk about that at all, but we're here to talk about this new book, the Faith Unboxed, and it is from Catholic Answers Press. And tell me what this book and what you are seeking to do in this book, Andrew.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you got your copy, Alan, and I'm really glad to talk about it. Like you, I came into full communion with the Catholic Church from a Protestant background. And so when I was thinking about that over a number of years, I had to kind of wrap my mind around what the Catholic Church was. And in a sense, like, I don't know if you felt this way, Alan, but sometimes people will say to me, "What were the biggest obstacles? Like, was it Mary? Was it, what was it?" Like, there are these biggest things. And honestly, for me, the biggest category of stuff to figure out was like, what is the church?
Mhm.
What is it? Am I in it already? Am I not in it enough? So so this question that theologians call ecclesiology, this discipline of like the theology of the church, has always been interesting to me. Well, at some point I just started doing a bit of writing, thinking about all the different words like that are sometimes used in relation to the Catholic Church, either by non-Catholics or by Catholics, that I think are not very helpful. Or if not the words themselves, kind of the ideas that sometimes people kind of imagine is what it is to be a Catholic. So in this book, I go through a number of words, and the book is called The Faith Unboxed. And the idea is supposed to be like these words that sometimes are used in relation to what it means to be a Christian or a Catholic, more specifically, are just way too small, if not completely wrong. So it was a fun book to write, and I'm really grateful to Catholic Answers. I'm not really an apologist, I'm mostly focused on culture stuff
Right.
and cinema and literature, but it was fun to kind of dip my toe into the world of defending the faith. But anybody who picks up the book's going to find a lot of film and literary and artistic and stuff, references like that in there, because that's what I do.
Well, I did see that cultural debris favorite Russell Kirk makes an appearance in the book, so that recommends it already.
I thought of you actually when I put that in there. Yeah. So one of the chapters is about ideology and how
Mhm.
the Catholic Church isn't just like a kind of better ideology to pick
Right.
from than, Marxism or any, whatever ideology you want to pick. But I start my little discussion about ideology in that chapter talking about conservatism and how, in a sense, conservatism might be considered the best ism of the isms, just because it sort of has embedded within it the idea that isms aren't such a great thing.
Right.
And so I referenced your old pal Russell Kirk in making that case.
Right. I mean, the understanding this is, of course, as you know, but a the idea of ideology, as properly understood, is itself ideology itself is a bad thing, and is really a secularized religion ultimately.
Right.
So the Catholic Church, by definition, is not an ideology unless one makes it so, in which case that's bad.
Yeah.
But 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 the Catholic Church, as properly understood, cannot be one, because it is a I guess the religion of all religions. But ecclesiology, going back to that, is actually an interesting topic to me, and I think a lot of people, or our religious environment, with, of course, in the U.S., with the dominance of Protestantism in most of the U.S., and you and I come from Protestant backgrounds, but very different sorts of Protestant backgrounds. But nonetheless, the Protestant background that I came from had a very strong preoccupation with ecclesiology. Interestingly enough, they didn't even think of it in those terms, um, because their theology per se was not something that they openly engaged in, I guess.
Hmm.
But ecclesiology was something they talked a lot about, and I guess it's a difficult topic to for a lot of people to think about, because most of Protestantism kind of shrugs off that ecclesiology even really matters, and that's why
Yeah.
you have this sort of sliding back and forth between different denominations and so forth, that it doesn't really matter which one you go to: Presbyterian, Episcopal, Methodist, whatever.
Right. Yeah, that was a major focus of the book for me. In fact, that was kind of the genesis of the book, was wrestling with the word denomination.
Mhm.
Because even in Catholic circles, you'll hear Catholics sort of essentially think of their religion, their faith, their Catholic faith as kind of just the best choice among many denominations, right? And the truth is the Catholic Church doesn't teach denominations.
Right.
That word is not in Catholic teaching at all. And even in as much as the Catholic Church engages ecumenically with Protestants or other groups of Christians, it doesn't ever refer to them as denominations. It always talks about ecclesial groups,
Mhm.
sometimes talks about churches if it's talking about Eastern Orthodox, that sort of thing. But the idea is that the body of Christ is not divided.
Right.
And when I wrap my head around that, because as a Protestant, I thought the body of Christ very much is divided. I mean,
Right.
that was the whole tragedy, right? Was like,
Mhm.
oh well, the church is all mixed up and split up, but we just all try our best, and what matters is really what's in our hearts, and and that kind of thing. But the Catholic Church just doesn't teach that. And when I really realized that, I was so relieved, Alan. I don't know if you were, but I mean, it was like I can have some solid ground to stand on.
Mhm.
And then I can actually look back on my Protestant past and have some mercy on myself, because I can actually say what I believed wasn't nothing. I mean, it wasn't like we were worshiping the devil. We weren't. But we were separated. We weren't in the fullness of communion. Our baptism was valuable. It was meaningful. It gave us a real connection to the real beating heart of faith, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough just to be in our own little enclave and say, well, who knows? Who knows what may happen? I learned so much from the Catholic Church about that.
Right. And I think that a book like this is is valuable for, I think, a lot of Catholics, because as you and I both know, official teachings of the Catholic Church and practical understanding of a lot of Catholics are uh, are far apart, and very often um, practical statements by even people who should know better in the church, in the hierarchy of the church, don't uh, don't carry the full weight of official Catholic teaching. And I think very often, in order to soften the blow of I guess what is an exclusive claim, but is but exclusive claims are unfashionable, that
Mm-hmm.
that that people are hesitant to make them. But like you, the answers that the Catholic Church gives it, are a relief to me, because I want those things to be the case. If I didn't believe that the Catholic Church was true, I wouldn't have become one.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, those exclusive claims were very important. They were fundamental to my attraction to it, because if it didn't make those fundamental claims, then I could just be whatever I wanted to be. And
Mm-hmm.
so then it doesn't matter. And I think that that's an issue that people really do need to wrestle with. Does it matter or not? And if not, why does it not?
Yeah. And I'm not trying to be some kind of know-it-all convert here, Alan. I mean, I don't want cradle
Converts
Catholics.
have taken it on the chin lately, I'm afraid.
We have. I know we have to stick up for ourselves a little bit, but
I
I'm
think
not.
so.
I mean, part of what I'm trying to do in the book is I'm not trying to actually, be all know-it-all focus, like let's look at what it says in this document. I mean, I do that a bit. I go to the catechism, I go to some papal documents, I go to the documents of Vatican II, and works of St. Augustine and great theologians. I dip into all of that. But what I'm really trying to do is give a sense of that. You use the word relief, maybe I've already used it too, but like to give that sense of like it's kind of a right brain book in a way, Alan. Like I'm really trying to like give people the sense of like what it feels like to think of being in the church, or in fact to experience being in the church, without having to pin it all into these categories that kind of make sense in a more secular mindset, or in a kind of Protestant denominationalist mindset, right? So in a
Right.
sense,
Yeah.
like that, it's more I mean, I hate to put it like this, but it's almost more kind of subjective. It's like it's me sort of trying to invite someone into thinking about what it feels like to belong to the fullness of faith.
Right. I mean, and when you're talking about, so going back to the idea of ideology, when you talk about sort of conservative liberal, you and I both come from a more traditional conservative viewpoint of things. But at the same time, the way we think of conservatism in a political context or a cultural context or whatever, the church, just as your book says, the church doesn't fit into that box. It's transcending labels that we try to put on things, and it's bigger than all of that. You can't contain it. And sometimes there are times when thinking about those things that I become somewhat internally frustrated, just because I recognize, maybe frustrated with myself, but also frustrated with the largeness of it. Because there are times when I recognize that I want to nail things down, maybe that I can't nail down, it's not possible, and it's actually good that it's not possible. And that's a temptation, I think, that all of us fall or become guilty of giving into. That we want to hold the church to certain in certain ways when it's trying to force us out of thinking in narrow ways, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That
Yeah,
can be a painful process.
I think that's right. And, I think a way to think about it that I talk about a little bit in the book is you could think about the Catholic Church as being mostly prescriptive, like you should do this, you shouldn't do that. Here's what the church teaches about this. Here's what the church prohibits about that. That's fine. The church does lots of that. But I think a better way in the long run to think about the church is as a descriptive body. Like, in other words, like the church is just trying to describe reality. That's what church teaching is. And so, of course, reality is not going to fit into the political, platform of any one party in any one country, let alone any one kind of spirit of any one age, right? So it's always going to be messy trying to participate in public things, in the public thing, I guess, as Catholics, when we live as we do in a world that does not acknowledge the church as, in a sense, like the fundamental organizing principle of our lives. Like our medieval ancestors did live in a world that was a little bit more like that. We don't. So we have to make do.
Right. We have to function in the world that we're in. At the same time, we do have to be careful of, and again, I think both sides, all sides, are guilty of this. There was I guess, a semi-prominent Catholic publication that had a recent article about how, these politicians, by doing this, clearly show that they're going to hell. Now, I'm, not wanting to debate those particular issues, but simply making the point that we have to be careful about associating prudential political decisions with our eternal soul. They're not disconnected necessarily, but they're also not they're not part of the creed either.
That's right.
So
yeah.
So we have to be careful in letting ourselves be polarized. And obviously, in American politics, we've recently had a Catholic president on one side of the political spectrum. We now have a Catholic vice president on the other side of the political spectrum. And I have my political preference between those two, but we also have to be wise enough to not identify their political proposals fully with what the faith ought or ought not to be, I guess.
I think that's right. And I don't get into too deep about
right.
much more of that in the book, but I will just say one of the chapters that I write about, one of the chapters is about how we shouldn't think of the church as a club.
Mm-hmm.
And, we do think about political parties, kind of political, like sort of different sides of the dividing line as kind of, we feel comfortable in them because we feel like we belong, like we feel like, okay, I think my opinions about X, Y, and Z kind of match up better on that side than on that side. So I feel like I have my people, I have my tribe, and it kind of gives meaning to my life. And that may not be the best way to go about life in the world, but it seems to be the way that a lot of us make sense of things. But the church really is going to challenge us somewhere along the line on those convictions. And I appreciated, by the way, you talked about our current sitting vice president, who's a Catholic, J.D. Vance. He gave a speech recently, I think, at the Catholic or at the prayer breakfast or something. It was one of these big events where he was standing in front of fellow Catholics, and he actually said something like, "I'm a relatively new Catholic, and so please hold me to account. Tell me when I'm saying things that don't sound like they line up with what the church teaches." And I don't know. For my part, I took him at his word. I think he meant it, and I think Catholics should do that.
Yeah, I think so. On the one hand, I think that converts are not always taken as seriously as they should be by cradle Catholics, and at the same time are not always given the grace that they should be by by cradle Catholics. And there are lifelong advantages I recognize that cradle Catholics have that as a convert I will never fully be able to obtain those advantages. At the same time, I recognize that as a convert, there are things that I know and understand in a different way than they do, and I think that can be good. And so, God is always seeking to bring a people to Himself. So we have to be careful about getting too boxed in,
Right.
as it were. Okay, Andrew, tell me last things that I haven't talked about with this book, and then because we're talking longer than this interview format can go. So.
Well, thank you for the extra time. I hope everybody enjoys the book. I put a bit of my own faith journey story into the book. I've been asked in the past to write a kind of conversion memoir, and I really have not wanted to do that. But this book kind of ends up doing a little bit of that. And I talk about my relationship with my father and the faith I grew up with in my home and certain aspects of the decisions that my family and I made when we decided, when we came into the Catholic Church. So I hope people will kind of identify with my personal story. It's got a bit of travel stuff in it, which I know you're all about, Alan.
Absolutely.
So hopefully people will enjoy that. Some European sites are featured in there. So, I put a lot of heart into the book, and I hope people get a lot out of it.
Well, yes, I look forward to diving into it more deeply. And again, this is available from Catholic Answers Press wherever fine books are sold, and I suppose one can purchase it online and so forth.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to exploring it. Obviously, as a convert myself, I like you, I'm sort of of two minds about the conversion story, because on the one hand, there are a lot of them out there. And I know from seeing the responses from a lot of people tend to roll their eyes at, oh no, another conversion story. At the same time, of course, I do find them interesting, because what is it that leads this person to make these decisions? And I think one box that we can often put people in, and that I know that I was guilty of this because of my own inclinations and my own background, but sometimes we can put people in a box on the right way to be drawn to the church and to become a Christian, to become a Catholic. And God uses all kinds of ways to do that, and the end result is what matters. The road traveled less so. So, but those are informative. Andrew Petiprin, The Faith Unboxed is the book. Thank you very much, and I enjoyed it. And we'd go on for a long time, but I don't know if anybody else would be interested in it. But people should pick up the book.
Thanks, Alan.
Thanks a lot.